Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Living Better with MG, How AI Enhances Treatment and Management. I'm Jenna Mbalo, and I'll be leading today's session. Before we get started, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat box located at the bottom of the Zoom menu bar, and we'll get to them during the Q&A segment. Today's session will be recorded and available to watch on YouTube following the presentation. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Alexion, Argenx, Amgen, UCB, and Johnson & Johnson. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We have Dr. Mert Aral, Chief Medical Officer at Huma, and Ben Irving, VP of AI at Huma. Welcome. I'll hand it over to you guys.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenna, for the introduction. And it's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you to MGFA for inviting us to participate in this webinar and tell you about the work that we have been doing in Myasthenia Gravis. Let me just present my screen quickly. Okay. All right, so today, what we want to talk to you guys about is a project that we have been working on for quite some time. Essentially, what we're talking about here is a digital-first MG care enhanced with objective AI measures. So we will talk a little bit about the MG solution that we have developed and the objective measures that we are currently validating to make it available to patients in the near future. In terms of the agenda today, just a brief introductions as to who we are. We'll then talk about what our essentially the journey in terms of developing this tool. And what sort of problems and pain points we're trying to solve there. And then my colleague, Ben, who heads up our AI team, will sort of dive deeper into the objective measures and give you a glimpse of what's coming. So just to introduce Huma, for those who may not know us, we are a digital-first care and research company based sort of headquartered in London. But we have a team in the US and Germany. And essentially what we do is developing technologies to drive adoption of digital-first care and research to accelerate delivery of proactive and predictive care. So today, our software is in more than 4,500 hospitals and clinics, and we have engaged millions of patients over the years. We've been around for almost 12 years, and we operate both on the care side as well as on the research side, collaborating with various different health systems, academia, and life science companies. And ultimately, what we have is a technology platform that enables very sort of rapid configuration of different disease management solutions in a regulated and safe way. And it comes with patient-facing applications as well as clinical dashboards for monitoring purposes, and this can be either sort of deployed as part of a provider network, a health system that want to keep a closer eye on their patients, or it could be launched and used as part of a clinical trial to collect data remotely from study participants. So that's essentially kind of our core bread and butter, and that's what we do here at Huma. In terms of the HumaMG journey, this is something that we have embarked on almost 2 years ago. And we understand essentially that MG is a highly complex condition. with a range of different symptoms, and the impact on the quality of life is certainly quite significant. And it's really remarkable to see that nearly half of generalized MG patients still continue to suffer from unmanageable symptoms, and which then highlights, of course, the need for enhanced treatment strategies, new technologies that can support that, and the right tools to equip the patients with. So when we said we started 2 years ago, when we started, what we really wanted to do is kind of understand, what are those unmet needs that those living with MG, as well as, from a healthcare professionals perspective, what can we do? What sort of technology tools can we bring that will actually make an impact, that will help the patients and the clinicians to drive more proactive and better care ultimately. And to do that, we have done several user research studies. We have spoken to a number of individuals living with MG, various clinical experts, key opinion leaders, really trying to extract, what can we develop, and what these tools are going to look like. So, and what we understood was that patients do not have the right tools to empower them to be essentially active participants in their care. And it is a highly unpredictable disease. It's like a roller coaster. There's a lot of painful trial and error. And at the same time, there's a significant amount of time that happens between sort of clinic visits, and we don't really have kind of visibility as to, how the individuals are responding to certain treatment regimens, and when we then go and see our, doctor, when we have that consultation, then it's sometimes difficult to kind of remember and convey in great detail, what has been happening in the last 3 months, in the last 6 months, and and how can we provide the right tools for the patients to enable that, and for the clinical teams, how can we provide them with the right data, with more real-time visibility on how patients are responding to certain treatments, so that we can better monitor progression, we can better tailor our treatment strategies, and essentially deliver more personalized care for MG patients. And we are doing that in collaboration with UCB. They have been absolutely fundamental in kind of driving some of these user research initiatives, trying to understand, what are the pain points and what is the ultimate mission and the goal of this project. And ultimately, what we are trying to do here is to empower every individual living with MG with a better understanding, so they can, they can be more active participants in their care, and at the same time helping the providers with the right tools, the right data, so that they can be more sort of tailored in the way that they offer different treatment strategies in a more personalized, more effective way, and ultimately to help everyone live their lives full of vibrancy, unconfined by the condition itself. So that's essentially our ultimate goal. This is a long-term goal for us. It always, starts with small steps, and ultimately what we have developed on the back of, sort of all of the user research, trying to understand, the pain points, etc., is a patient-facing application, which the core goal of it is to basically empower patients, right? To help them understand how myasthenia gravis affects their, everyday lives, how giving them the right tools to be able to track and visualize these real-world experiences, as well as delivering sort of trusted educational content, improving their understanding of the condition, so that they can be better informed about the sort of care management strategies and be participants in that, right? And at the same time, enabling better communication between the provider to facilitate more effective care discussions. When we have sort of built this initial version of the application, the key features that we've included in there based on our user research were things like MG-ADL questionnaire, which allows patients to essentially log their symptoms and how these symptoms are affecting their daily activities, as well as some of the triggers that are associated with these symptoms, so that we can get a better understanding of that sort of individual patient profile, and how certain triggers can essentially cause flares of the condition. We also have things like EQ5D questionnaire, which is a quality of life questionnaire, which is very important for us to kind of keep track and monitor, as well as things like medication reminders, adherence monitoring with notifications. It allows you to track your activity levels, share photos with your clinical teams. Of course, the educational content is part of it. But at the same time, all of this data that the patients can log and monitor their conditions with the click of a button, you have the ability to generate PDF summary reports, so that you can take this information to the next consultation with your neurologist, and essentially have a more informed discussion about the treatment strategies. So a better visibility as to what's been happening in the last 3 months, last 6 months, so that we can better tailor the treatments, the dosages, and so on. What we've also added here is something called a helper feature for those who may be less tech savvy, who may not be able to sort of interact with a smartphone for various reasons. Then again, you have the ability to invite either a caregiver, a loved one, next of kin, who can essentially monitor your progress or input data on your behalf, and help you with the management of the condition itself. Now, this solution also comes with a clinical dashboard. And this, again, is mainly for the healthcare providers, the clinical teams, to have real-time visualization of the patient-reported data, the MG-ADL questionnaires broken down into different components, and various different alert and flagging systems for triaging. So if, again, we can notice certain trends in terms of a patient potentially deteriorating, then we can be more proactive about that and take action, and see the right patient at the right time, or change that medication in a more timely manner, rather than waiting for that full deterioration and the flare, and be more proactive about the management. It also comes with all types of communication tools, messaging, telemedicine. It has the ability to integrate with electronic medical records and data export functionalities, and so on. So that's basically our initial version of what we call the HumaMG. There's a patient-facing app and a dashboard, and today we have gone live with this solution in various different geographies. So our first site was in France, in Nice, together with Professor Sacconi. This was also framed as a usability study. So we had an initial cohort of around 20 patients who started using the application, and that allowed us to kind of further iterate and make some adjustments to the tool. And then we went live in the US, and then the UK, and we are imminently going live in Netherlands. We have some upcoming launches in 2025. So we are hoping to launch this at Mass General in Boston, and then 2 new geographies for us in 2025, Japan, Canada. But ultimately, our goal is to make this tool available to all MG patients globally, and that's the ultimate goal. Now, based on the sort of initial feedback from these initial sort of early adapters, early launches, we are getting extremely positive feedback. The patients are loving the application. They're loving the resources. They're able to kind of educate themselves, and the communication tools with the clinical teams. They're finding it extremely useful. So overall, I think the satisfaction has been quite remarkable, and the response has been great. So we want to, scale this and provide it to more individuals with MG and care providers as quickly as possible. Now, you may ask yourself, what makes this tool, different, from some of the other tools that are out there, some of the other digital solutions that are out there. Now, the HumaMG solution is built on what we call the Huma Cloud Platform infrastructure. And this infrastructure is a highly regulated disease-agnostic software as medical device platform. So the HumaMG, by default, is also a regulated, CE-marked, FDA-cleared, EU MDR-cleared software as medical device. What this means is that given our kind of regulatory approvals today across the globe, so across Europe, UK approvals, US FDA, we have MDSAP, Saudi, India, Japan. So this basically allows us to scale this solution and launch it in multiple geographies very, very quickly. And at the same time, when we've received these regulatory approvals of the platform, we kept our intended use extremely broad. And also as part of our technical files, we've also included a number of predictive AI algorithms and clinical decision support tools. So the intended use of the platform allows us to build in these types of technologies and innovations very, very quickly and introduce it into hands of patients and the clinical teams. And that's what I kind of really want to talk to you guys about in the next section, is more focused around the AI algorithms, because when we look at the challenges with the MG assessment and care today, the application that we have today, that we have already launched and went live with, it's great, it helps, it works, the patients are loving it, but at the same time, it is still very much driven by subjective reporting of data from the individuals themselves, right? So it still relies on, essentially the patients reporting their symptoms, the patients kind of completing the MG-ADL questionnaire and so on. And again, when you look at some of these quotes from MG patients, they're saying, it's a roller coaster. They don't know what their exactly baseline is. It's always kind of up and down. No one except for other MG patients really understand the snowflake nature of this and how difficult the management can be. And it's completely understandable, because it's a condition where there are no real sort of biomarkers that we can monitor in terms of progression of the condition, right? So when you take somebody with hypercholesterolemia, for example, you can do sort of cholesterol checks and make sure that the treatment is working, and it's not really the case for MG, right? And without this sort of real-time data, it's very challenging to identify uncontrolled patients at the right time, better understand kind of how the symptoms are fluctuating, what the disease burden is, and how do we sort of monitor progression. So again, as mentioned, it's all right now the way we look after these patients, and this is not just specific for MG, but for all conditions really. You go and see your doctor, you have your consultation, they prescribe you a treatment regimen, and they say, okay, I'll see you in 3 months' time, or I'll see you in 6 months' time. But we don't have sort of real-time visibility as to whether they're responding to the treatment, what their quality of life is like. Should we maybe try something else? Is there any signs of deterioration? Is the disease progressing? Are we, how effective is the treatment, right? So, and without that sort of real-time data, it's very difficult to do that type of proactive care management. It will always be sort of reactive until the patient is so symptomatic that they have to either, call their doctor or end up in emergency department or have an, unplanned visit, right? And that's what we're essentially trying to avoid. And even with some basic things like, MG-ADL reporting, this is a type of data, clinicians never had access to, this type of granularity, right? In between sort of consultations. So, and that's great, but, we're still talking about subjective measures, right? So we're still kind of talking about things that, the patient is experiencing, right? And even though these are very useful tools, it's still very much, influenced by the current state of the patient, how they're sort of describing their feelings and their symptoms. And there are certain problems with that, right? So, and that's kind of, what we're trying to solve with some of these AI metrics that we're trying to develop. So when you look at from a patient's perspective, the symptoms are constantly fluctuating. It's sometimes quite difficult to quantify feelings, right? How do you translate a weakness? How do you put that onto a scale? Is it a 5 or a 6? Is it a 7 or a or a 4? Right? It's difficult to quantify these symptoms and in an effective way. And of course, a patient's perception of how severe they think their symptom may be might be different from, the doctor's assessment, right? So again, there's a bit of a clash and a challenge there. And of course, it's not just the physical symptoms. There's also, the emotional and cognitive components to that. And from a clinician's perspective, again, each clinician may interpret subjective measures differently, and standardization becomes quite difficult. There might be some bias in terms of how you interpret the patient's perspective of the severity of the symptom. So these are some of the things that we know are challenging with regards to subjective measures. Although they're very useful, very helpful, it's still better than what we're doing today. Still gives us much greater granularity and visibility as to how an individual is responding to certain treatment in between those consultations, and it's wonderful. But how can we go to that next level, right? How can we bring more quantitative measures to MG care, right? Because we know if we can deliver more objective measures, and these are measurable, they are consistent, it provides with clear numbers that allows us to track progress over time. They're more reliable than subjective reporting. And again, this is essentially what we use in a lot of other conditions, right? So when you look at something like, I don't know, asthma monitoring, for example, we have spirometer devices that the patients can blow into, which gives us a very quantifiable metric as to how their lungs are doing, right? So if we could do that for MG, and if we can kind of quantify and create these objective measures for certain symptoms of MG, then again, we can provide both the patients and the clinical teams with this sort of very valuable information that can inform the treatment decisions, that can better help understand and evaluate whether the sort of treatment regimens are working, and ultimately also gives a delightful experience to the patients to be able to do these types of assessments at home rather than sort of doing it in clinic every time with a physical examination. So being able to capture these data points more frequently in between those visits certainly goes a long way. And ultimately, that's what kind of we believe sets HumaMG apart, is that because these types of AI measures, in order to kind of bring them into the care delivery environment and provide the clinical teams with these types of metrics to drive clinical decisions, they need to be accurate, they need to be reliable, they need to be validated, and they need to be a medical device ultimately, right? This is what we call a software as medical device. And ultimately the FDA approvals and the other regulatory approvals that the Huma platform has, and with the intended use to be able to deploy such algorithms in care settings, we believe is extremely valuable and has the potential to transform the way that we deliver care and in a more sort of proactive and predictive way for the future. So I'm going to pass over to Ben right now, who's going to talk a little bit about the process of developing these objective AI measures, and give you a glimpse of what they look like.
Thanks, Mert. So here we'll talk about developing these AI objective measures. Now, quantitative measures are used within the clinic. So, for example, the QMG score, the quantitative Myasthenia Gravis score, is one of the sort of key measures that can be performed in the clinic. There's also simplified versions such as the MGC score, MG composite, and there's active sort of iterations with QMGR on how to potentially improve these measures. And these are essentially the gold standard for quantifying MG disease severity. And this includes looking at vision, ptosis, which is eye drooping, facial muscle weakness, general muscle fatigue, grip strength, swallowing, etc. And this really provides an objective way of assessing the current state of the disease and its progression with multiple measures. And these are performed by clinicians, in-person examinations. And it is recognized by key opinion leaders and clinical experts as the sort of robust assessment tool. And this serves basically as a solid foundation for potential digitization of these measures. So taking these measures out of the clinic, making a digital automated solution, and then potentially using these at home. Next slide, please, Mert. And another reason why this is of interest to us now is there's been a lot of development from a machine learning, deep learning point of view in terms of technology to capture changes in different characteristics. So, for example, technology now can track in real time facial movements. So with multiple points on the face, look at changes live in those points and how they relate to each other. And this technology is becoming more and more advanced that even small changes can be essentially tracked. Now, this is actually quite pervasive. It's being used in video calls, etc. You can overlay various characteristics. But from a medical perspective, there's still very much areas for improvement. So the technology is generally used quite roughly with mobile phones. So more accuracy and essentially bespoke solutions is needed for specific characteristics, say ptosis, arm fatigue, etc. And of course, as Mert mentioned, we're talking about integration into a medical device. So a significant validation is needed for the intended use case, so that we can show that it's accurate within a specific disease population, such as MG patients. And similar for voice, there's been a lot of active development in the space in terms of measuring audio. So it could be voice, it could be coughing, etc. One example is from Google recently, I think in the last month, was health acoustic representations. And this is basically a foundational model that's based on a very large amount of data that can then be tuned for specific applications and can then be on much smaller amounts of data, be very accurate for detecting, for example, coughs related to tuberculosis, etc. And along with these sort of foundational models, there's also very powerful features that can also be used, such as articulation rate, pauses, pitch, jitter, shimmer in your voice. So there's features that pick up specific characteristics that can then be used to analyze the voice. And as I mentioned before, it's important not to just focus on the algorithm and develop the solution. It's really important to develop a solution that is effective for the use case. So that involves expert collaboration for design and clinical needs. So we've partnered with leading MG specialists and researchers, identifying the key symptoms that can be translated from a quantitative score to a digitized score, and ensuring that these tools are useful in the real world. Then data collection is obviously critical through clinical studies. So we're actively working with a number of partners, collecting detailed information on running clinical studies where we're collecting various detailed information on MG symptoms, as well as the raw audio and video. And we're gathering both sort of new digital measures from these from this audio and video, along with the more traditional assessments that Mert mentioned, just so that we have a more holistic picture of the whole disease pathway. And then after that, it's also very important to focus on the validation. So make sure that it works in different lighting conditions or other conditions that a user may use the device. Or if we feel like the algorithm's not effective, put what we call quality control steps in place to check if the conditions are right, and otherwise flag to the user. And then the final step is working with patients, making sure that these tools are easy to use, accurate, etc. Thanks, Mert. And so what we've developed is 4 objective AI measures for MG. The first one is arm fatigue. So it's automatically measuring the time to fatigue, so how long you can hold your arm up before fatigue. We then have 2 voice-based measures, dysarthria and dysphonia, where dysarthria is very much around weakness of the muscles related to speech, which leads to slowness of speech, stuttering, or speaking in short bursts. And dysphonia is more focused on the larynx, so then it's about pitch or changes in volume, etc., etc. And then we have ptosis, which is a measure of fatigue of the upper eyelid. So again, it's a fatigue-based measure, but we have one which is related to more generalized fatigue using the arm, and one which is specific to the eye muscles. So jumping into some of these measures, on the left-hand side, you can see an early sort of prototype that we developed. And what we're essentially doing is, for arm fatigue, it's quite a key sort of example of fatigue, and it's common, you know, it's the characteristic that shows up, and it's a measure of muscle endurance, etc. And what we're doing is, by using custom models that we've developed in-house, we can then track those arm movements over time and look at the angle changes over time in the arm. And as the fatigue sets in, we can see various muscle movements, either shaking or dropping of the arm. And we can use that to then set a threshold to define when this fatigue is set in. And the key benefit of this, and Mert, maybe you can just play the video. The key benefit of this is that AI-based tracking essentially provides a standardized objective assessment. It's not influenced by the person making the measurement. It's a set algorithm that is then repeatable and can be performed at home. And here we're actually showing one version of the app. Since then, we've actually developed it further, and we've improved the user experience, but we're not quite ready to release that sort of next version of the prototype. But essentially, what this is doing is providing a set of instructions that guides the user to acquire the images. So that includes which arm, whether someone is helping you or not, and then positioning of the phone so that you can perform this recording. And it's also important to note that we're not playing audio here, but all of this comes with audio because the user may be quite far away from their phone. They can't see the instructions. So there's audio messages once this exercise starts. And at this stage, we're essentially guiding the user through the steps. And when they're ready, they can press start. And that's essentially when this exercise begins. And this is a demo of a user. In this case, they're using their laptop as a stand, but it could be whatever's available, a set of books, etc. And they position the phone and then they step back and sit down, and they follow the instructions to then raise their arm and record the fatigue. So this is the view from the phone. It's checking the position. Even though the user's not quite aligned, the algorithm is, it meets the algorithm requirements, and the algorithm is robust to all sorts of variation in positioning, etc. When it's correct, the measurement then starts and the person must hold their arm as long as possible, essentially. There's various checks in place where a user may, by mistake, slightly drop their arm where it's not fatiguing. They've just lost track of where their arm is. And we receive prompts to show that. And then at the end of the exercise, when they are fatigued, the measurement automatically completes. And that's when this video is sent to the back end. Now, we're doing a lightweight analysis on the phone, but in order to allow all sorts of phones to be used that have a suitable camera, we're sending the video to a server where the sort of detailed analysis takes place that analyzes the whole video and assesses where fatigue is likely to occur. In a similar way, we can analyze ptosis, which is drooping of the upper eyelid. And this again is often induced through fatiguing. So in QMG, it's a 60-second fatigue test where you look up for 60 seconds. MGC, it's 45 seconds. And what we're essentially measuring is the time to that fatigue occurring. We also have an additional measure that, as well as measuring how much time it takes before your eyelids start to fatigue, is the severity of the fatigue that occurs. And again, we see this as a tool that can be used at home, that's standardized, etc., and it has a number of benefits to allow sort of more regular monitoring. This is a video of the ptosis app. This is a slightly different video to the previous video because we wanted to highlight the importance of quality control steps. So not all users may follow instructions correctly. They may not understand, or their phone may drop. And we don't want to be trying to analyze data that's not acceptable for analysis, because we may not get a result that's correct. So this video just illustrates all the checks that we have in place that'll then prompt the user move closer, move back if they're too close, straighten your head, etc., etc. And this is really just to make sure that what we're analyzing is correct. So we hope that most users use it correctly and don't have to go through all these steps of being prompted to move back, move forwards, don't cover your eye, etc., etc. But it just highlights the process that we are actually detecting any issues with the recording so that we can make sure that we're recording this correctly. And after it starts recording, there's a series of exercises. And again, this is to induce fatigue. Again, this user is trying to break the system. But the steps are essentially a 10-second looking forwards, and that's establishing a baseline. There's then 45 seconds looking upwards, and that's creating a fatigue. And then we're measuring that time to fatigue. And then there's the final 10 seconds of looking forwards again. And that establishes the severity. So we're doing multiple measures by performing this exercise. And it can be performed quite quickly by just quickly going through those 3 steps to then get a measurement of the time to ptosis and the ptosis severity. And that's all recorded. both on the clinical dashboard and direct to the patient. And you can then look at trends over time, whether it's on a daily basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, etc. I think we'll go over dysarthria and dysphonia quite quickly, just due to time. But essentially, as mentioned, dysarthria is about difficulty speaking, so slurred or slow speech. Dysphonia is related to challenges of pitch, loudness, etc. And as part of this, what we essentially have is background checks, again, just making sure that the environment is correct. And then we go through a process of exercises, which are then used to measure the severity of dysarthria and dysphonia. So in this case, we're using Buttercup, which is to detect dysarthria. And then we also have a sustained vowel, which is saying ah, and that's for detecting dysphonia. And again, we go through a series of steps where a baseline is established. There's a fatiguing exercise of counting from 1 to 50, and then additional measurement is made. And so the user is just performing these recordings, but we're performing the analysis after it's sent to the back end, and from that we can establish severity, etc. So as mentioned, there's a number of core sort of components to what we do. One is obviously the algorithm development stage. The most important first stage is working with KOLs and designing the experience. There's an app development stage where we integrate that algorithm into the app. But then almost most importantly is performing studies to validate performance. So we're working with a number of UK sites through the University of Southampton, and Leiden University in the Netherlands. And this is essentially the start of the validation process, where we're validating in those two countries and we're looking to expand. And this is collecting data from audio, video, questionnaires, as well as quantitative scores to validate the effectiveness of this tool, beyond the current validation that we've done. This is taking it one step further, essentially. And I mean, the impact that we see, I think we've spoken to this a bit already, but the impact that we see is that by regular at-home monitoring, we can provide better identification of disease progression, response to therapy, and also potentially use it for both short-term and long-term impact of therapy. So it could be looking at daily changes, either due to just general fatigue or specific short-term therapies, or looking at longer-term progression from other therapies. And we see this as a valuable tool to supplement the clinical pathway, essentially. So we're not trying to replace clinical visits. We're trying to provide extra information between those visits.
Perfect.
And yeah, over to you, Mert.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for walking us through the AI measures, and we'll kind of wrap this up to a close. Just to kind of summarize the points that we've discussed. So we're working with academic partners, life science partners. MGFA have been extremely instrumental and helpful in the development of the solution. So thank you very much for their collaboration as well. We have now launched the application already, the first version of it that does not include the AI measures, but we are very much looking forward to kind of enhancing the experience and adding these new state-of-the-art algorithms that will allow individuals to be able to quantify their symptoms and generate more objective data to inform better treatment decisions ultimately. And as Ben mentioned, running a number of sort of multi-site, multi-country studies to kind of validate these metrics at the moment. But our goal is to kind of introduce these metrics in sort of early 2025 into the HumaMG solution. And also important to mention here that this is just a beginning for us, right? This is a long journey that we're on, and we want to continuously iterate and improve these tools. And when you look at something like arm fatigue, for example, right? You still kind of as an individual with MG, you still have to sit there and hold your arm for 60 seconds, right? And to get that quantification of the fatigability of the muscle. But we want to build these tools more into sort of daily activities through passive sensors, right? As we all know, wearables are becoming more and more common these days, and affordable as well. So if we can, run some of these algorithms on, things like, the Fitbits and, smartwatches, so that we can actually quantify, arm fatigue and other symptoms of MG during daily activities, whether that's, picking up groceries or carrying your child. And, if we can measure that without the actual sort of assessment of sitting down and doing it, that's the ultimate goal for us. So, but in order to get there, this is where we have to start, and continue to improve and iterate. And in order to do that, we need you. So we need everybody, right? So we need the rare disease community. We want everybody to join forces, patients, other digital health companies like ours that are developing different technologies, the clinical teams, academia, and we essentially are keen to kind of collaborate and kind of further iterate and improve these tools that can improve patient care ultimately. And in order to scale these technologies, we need that. We need that collaboration ultimately. So if you are a patient, an individual living with MG, and you're watching this webinar and you want to find out more, you want to access the application, at least the first version of it, and you want to test it, you want to give us your feedback, please, feel free to visit the website or scan the QR code. You can download it directly from the App Store. It's available on iOS and Android. And again, if you're a clinician, a researcher, or if you want to collaborate with us in any shape or form, then yeah, please feel free to reach out to us at any point. And thank you so much for listening. And we're happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Ben and Mert. That was really informative. We have a couple of questions, and I just wanted to also mention that we put, in addition to the QR code that you shared, we also put the link for the app in the chat box. So if anybody wants to look there, they can access it as well. This first question says, I'm an MG patient. This technology is very interesting for symptom tracking. Do you take into consideration time of day? If I see my neurologist in the early morning, I perform much better than later in the day due to aggregated muscle fatigue.
Absolutely. It is actually taken into consideration. So every single data point, every assessment, especially when it comes to, some of these objective measures that can, try to quantify fatigability. As soon as you do that assessment, everything is sort of date and time stamped. So when you kind of pull all of that data out in either a PDF summary, or you have a clinical team that is actually monitoring that information on a dashboard, then it's all date and time stamped, and they can see exactly what time of day it is, and when the measurement was taken, or when you've reported your symptoms. So everything is very, very much very clear in that perspective.
That's great.
Maybe just to add, sorry, before you move on, I think we see this also as a solution that can be used in different ways as we move to deploy it. So certain clinicians may want to use it in a certain way and may instruct their patients to monitor much more regularly if it's uncontrolled. It could be multiple times per day, whereas other patients may only want to use it every few weeks, etc., etc.
Great, thank you. This other question is, where is the HumaMG app available?
So it's currently available in the US. So actually, in the US, you can go to the App Store or the Google Store, and you can download the application directly. So we believe that it's still a very beneficial tool for patients to have, just purely to educate themselves and log their symptoms and MG-ADL scores currently. But then obviously in 2025, we will be introducing the AI algorithms into that application as well. And at the same time, we are going through sort of deploying it through the healthcare professionals as well, through the providers. So that's slightly different. Because then ultimately, if we are introducing a technology like this and enabling these providers to do monitoring of their patients, then we have to do that through the institution, through the clinic, right, or the hospital. And then, once we have an agreement with a neurology team, let's say, a neurology department of a health system, then they can essentially, just like a treatment or an intervention, they can prescribe the application to their MG patients and start the monitoring process. So, but you can always download it directly and use it to log your own symptoms and access the educational content and so on, and still generate those PDF summary reports that you can take to your next consultation. But if you want the full-fledged monitoring, that has to come from your provider. So if you are having your next consultation, please tell your clinician, your neurologist, about this tool, and if they're interested in implementing it in their practice, then they can always get in touch with us. It's free for them to use it, and it's free to download for patients as well. It's also available in the UK and Europe as well. But, just to highlight that, sorry.
That's great, thank you. Let me see. When is the clinical validation study for the AI features going to be complete? Is there any place for us to know more about the clinical validation study? Is it registered in clinicaltrials.gov?
Ben?
I think we might have to follow up on all the information, but it's essentially been through the standard processes with our partners. So both in the UK through Southampton and in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we're just sort of finalizing a few pieces before we kick it off. And in the UK, we're a little bit further, but we're actually, we're just about to kick it off. So we're just in that process of finalizing all those pieces before patients are actually recruited. But I think if anyone's interested, we can also follow up on the material that's available online. I'm not sure if it's been published yet, but there should be material for these studies available shortly, essentially, as we've gone through the sort of ethics process, etc.
Ultimately, all of the sort of outcomes of the studies, with regards to the validation, accuracy, usability, etc. Once all of those checks are done and the data comes out, ultimately all of that goes into the technical file of the solution, which we then submit to the FDA and as an amendment, and they review it. So before we push any of these measures to patients or to help clinical teams make certain decisions, it will go through an FDA review process and be approved before we actually launch it, based on the evidence coming from the clinical validation studies.
And maybe just to address the second part of the question, we're aiming to have both these studies, so multiple sites in the UK and in the Netherlands, complete by early 2025. Obviously, this depends on the speed of patient recruitment, etc., for these studies, but Q1 2025 is our aim to sort of collect all the data and gather this evidence.
Thank you. Do you have a specific process for telling my provider how to review this information?
We so as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, right at the beginning, right? Our technologies or the monitoring technologies is it's in more than 4,500 hospitals and clinics globally, right? So we very much have a process for that. But you know, if a clinical team is interested in you know, working with us and deploying this technology for their patients, then absolutely. But at the end of the day, we have to then, you know, as Huma, go and contract with that clinic, with that hospital. We have to go through their sort of information governance processes and so on before we can kind of enable the clinical teams to do that sort of full-fledged monitoring. So, you know, as a patient, all you can do is just tell your doctor that the solution like this exists, and you can always contact us, and we can reach out to those clinical teams on your behalf and initiate a conversation and hopefully make this available to you guys.
Thank you. This last one is a comment, which I wanted to share. It's, yes, better quantitative measures. I find the MG-ADL to be inadequate and the MG-QOL not much better. I score low, but clearly have issues with stamina, range of motion, and peak strength that the scales don't really address.
Thank you for that comment. This is exactly why we're working on these measures.
And we have just a couple more comments. Somebody mentioned that a brochure would be useful as you work on sharing some of the research that's been done. And then one more was just about with regulatory filing. Are we still expecting the AI features to be available in the 25 platform?
Yes. Yes. And that's the beauty of it, really, because we already have a, you know, FDA 510K class 2 approval as a platform. And within that approval, there's a, within the intended use of that approval, we have the ability to deploy and host these types of AI algorithms. So the approval process will be hopefully accelerated because of that reason. So we won't be doing a full-fledged submission from scratch to the FDA, but rather an amendment to our technical file to be able to kind of drop these algorithms into the existing HumaMG solution.
Well, Ben and Mert, thank you so much for your presentation today. Thank you for your time. We really appreciated having you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.